Many thanks for joining us. My name is Lillian Muli and this is Women in Leadership. Now, April is World Autism Month, and as we approach April, tonight we want to increase understanding and acceptance of autism. Now, my guest in studio on Women in Leadership is Suzanne Gichuru. She's a mother of an autistic child, and she started a school for special needs children after struggling with finding a school that could accommodate her child. She's the co-founder of Pearl's Garden School, where, of course, special needs children are taught and where they're able to interact, with children that are dealing with the same issue. Also, that's a special needs professional, Haron Kimani, who will be walking us through what the symptoms are and how to indeed cope with these symptoms and help the child walk through this journey. I want to start with you, Suzanne, and thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Yeah.
How and when did you first discover that your child was different?
Yeah, thank you, Lillian, and thank you for having me in this show. It is the month of autism, and so we need to create awareness. I first realized that there was a problem with my son at the age of 2 years. He was not able to see any word at all, and he was very hyper. He was 100% hyperactive. By saying he was hyperactive, I mean that he was all over. He never settled, never slept, never sat down. It was all about walking around, running around, and it was very traumatizing for me as a mother, because I was wondering, when will this child ever settle down? And also I realized that he never wanted to play with children. He was always isolating himself. He just wanted to stay with me as the mother and as adults, because he didn't want to go to where children were. He had a very big problem of social interaction. Yeah.
Do you have other children? Is this why you noticed that he was different?
I have 3 children. My firstborn son was okay, he was fine. But for my second son, Christian, I realized that he was very different from his older brother. Yeah.
So you noticed all these differences between the 2 children. What did you do then?
When I realized that he was different, I tried to seek for help from professionals, but as we always do as mothers, I tried to seek for help from my friends who had children, and they were telling me by the age my son was 2 years, he was saying every word, and I was wondering, my son does not have even a single word. So I had to seek for professional help, and that is when I took him to a neurologist who was quick to pronounce that your child has autism.
You went to a neurologist and
Yeah.
not a pediatrician.
No.
Why did you automatically? Because I know a lot of mothers say that they initially just assume that the child is perhaps unwell, so they take the child to a pediatrician, but you automatically went to a neurologist.
I went to a neurologist because some time back I used to work in a hospital, and I knew that anything concerning speech or any development will always come from the brain. So I went to a neurologist who was quick to advise me.
Right, and for a lot of new mothers, they can perhaps get impatient, and even the caregivers, the nannies, they can get impatient with a child and be extremely mean to the child because they don't understand what the child is going through. Were you ever impatient? Were you irritable? Did you find like your child was just, you know how new mothers can be like, mtoto anasumbua, Did you ever feel that way?
Yeah, I felt that he was chaotic, because you'd break things, you'd jump up and down, the house would never be in order. I was impatient at some point. But because he was a very loving child and he was very adorable, at some point I tried to understand him, and I thought that this phase would pass away, but it never did.
So when you went to the neurologist, what did the neurologist, after giving the diagnosis, advise?
Yeah, the neurologist was quick to tell me the things that will help alleviate the situation, because he told me that autism does not have a cure, but there are remedies that can always alleviate the symptoms. He talked about the speech therapy, and he also talked about the special diet, which I started implementing immediately, because my worry was 20 years from today, where will my son be? So that is why I was quick to implement everything that the neurologist had told me about.
At this time, you're talking about your little boy. How is he interacting with other children, perhaps where you live, or his siblings and indeed relatives? How does he interact, or how was he interacting with them?
At that time, he was not able to interact with children, and he was always fighting with his older brother, because he could not communicate, he could not speak, and he was wondering, why can't I talk like my other brother? And so he always wanted to have his way. And because I was feeling for him, I was always on his side, just trying to be his advocate.
So time for taking the child to school came.
Yeah.
Did you look for a school? Did you find an appropriate school for the child?
Yeah. Time for taking my child to a school came. And what I went through, Lillian, was just frustrating. I went around because I was very keen. I wanted my son, because the neurologist had advised me that if you take the right interventions, your son will be able to transit to be a normal child. So it was very frustrating for me to get the school that was doing the right thing. I couldn't find anything that the neurologist had told me about. There are some things he had told me to look out for, and I didn't find any of those. Did you ever manage to enroll him in any school and go through any disappointments or frustration with the institution and how they were dealing with the child? I managed to enroll him in a daycare, and all I was getting were just phone calls from the management of the daycare. They were just telling me, we can't handle your son. Can you come for your son and take him home? We can't handle him anymore. And I was like, why? They were like, because your son is just chaotic. We don't know what to do with him. It was very frustrating. And he stayed at home for almost 3 months because I didn't know where to take him. And then you are the founder of Pearl's Garden School. Yeah. Is this what prompted you to start your own school for the baby? Yeah, that's what prompted me to start the school, because I was not in education industry. Far from it. You remember we had met in KTN. That is where I was working. But because of the challenges I went through with my son, I was like, I just have to start something. If not for anyone else, but for him as a person. And that is when I decided to partner with a special needs professional, that is Mr. Haron Kimani, and we decided to start the school. I'll be talking to you very shortly on how different your school is, Pearl's Garden, and indeed what type of attention you give to the children. Let me cross over to you. Haron Kimani is a special needs professional, and I want to begin by talking about spotting signs. You know, Suzanne has touched briefly on the child being hyperactive and not being able to talk by the time the child was turning 2, but what are some of the basic symptoms of autism in children?
Thank you, Lillian, for the question and having us here too. I want to start with the definition of autism. Autism is a neurodevelopmental condition that impairs a child's ability for social interaction, verbal, non-verbal, as well as causing repetitive behaviors, as well as restricted mannerisms. Now, with that, as Madam Suzanne has spoken, there are certain symptoms, but you call them characteristics in autism because they are the actual appearances that manifest in a child, such that the child is able to protrude the same to the outside world. And one of them is majorly on the social interaction domain. The child is basically on solitary play. But initially, as young as 6 months, a parent can observe and identify certain tendencies that will indicate a situation of autism or potential characteristics that might warrant such a case. One, a baby or a toddler at the age of infancy will not have a focused attention to the mother while suckling. And the
eye contact.
The eye contact is basically not there. For a child who is at that age, as young as 6 months, as a mother, you can know and identify that my child really is not looking at me. And by that means or indicates that that child could be deviant in one way or the other. But let alone because of lack of language, and particularly the spoken language, delays in the milestones of language acquisition should also be an area of concern to your mother.
And we've run the graphics, as you can see there on the screen there, as a special needs professional talks. But in the interest of time, the expectant mothers right now, and you know, women who intend to have children, who are asking what causes it. Is there something that perhaps that you know that can be done to avoid getting an autistic child?
That's correct, Molly, because there is no single cause of autism that is known, but it's a combination of genetic and environmental factors. Genetic means that that child would be predisposed in line with the genetic code. That is more scientific and biological. But more so are factors known that are caused due to exposure to certain environmental issues or situations.
So there's no known cause as of now?
There is no single known cause, but there is a combination of factors. So already there are known causes of autism. They are either genetic or environmental. Environmental would be like, for example, exposure to certain elements, hard metals like mercury, drugs abuse for an expectant mother, situations like exposure to certain infections while you are expectant as a mother. There is also a cause like rubella or German measles. So there are quite a number of causes or triggers of autism.
Now, what should people not familiar with raising an autistic child know? For instance, how to calm the child down. Suzanne here talked about, you know, schools calling her and telling her, come and pick your child up, your child is too hyperactive, we can't cope with the child. How to calm down this child?
Right, calming down of a child is basically multi-dimensional. One, it depends on the diet that the child is taking. Therefore, as a mother or a father, the diet that the child takes, and basically for autistic children, it has to be gluten-free, casein-free, that is milk-free.
Gluten-free?
Gluten-free.
Please break that down for us. What does that mean?
Gluten-free means that the diet must be wheat-free.
No wheat?
No wheat. No
chapatis, no mandazis?
No biscuits, and nothing that is related to wheat, as well as dairy products such as milk, which contains casein. That is the basic or minimum requirement for the calming of the child. Diet is critical.
Is there any medication that the children are put on, autistic children?
Really no specific medication for an autistic child, because medication might be intended to lower the hyperactivity of the child, which basically should be managed through dietary, proper dietary needs.
And finally, can autistic children live independently as adults? Not even as adults, but even as teenagers. Can they have an active life? Can they live independently as they age?
It is possible, Molly, because what we need is as early as possible start the intervention process. If a parent, a father or a mother identifies certain deviant characteristics in your child, an early intervention is recommended so that the child may be able to live as independently as possible.
Thank you for that. Suzanne, as we begin to wind up, early intervention, as Harun here talks about, this is what Pearl's Garden School specializes in. So how different is this school? What is it that you do for autistic or special needs children that perhaps another ordinary school would not do?
Well, Pearl's Garden School is an early intervention center. We base our strength on the child. We have individualized education programs per child. We don't compare children and we don't group them together. Actually, when a child comes to the school, the first thing that happens is the assessment. This enables us to know where is your child at and what do we need to do.
And what have been some of the gains? Let me talk about your child, you as a parent. What have been some of the gains of putting the child under this individualized attention?
My child actually moved from being 100% hyper to 0% hyper. He was able to calm down, he was able to talk, he was non-verbal by the age of 4, and he began saying words. Right now he has so many words, he can make one word.
How old is he now?
He's 5 years old. Yeah, he's able now to talk.
Okay.
Yeah, he has sentences.
And what still concerns you about your child at 5 years old?
Yeah, for now at 5 years old, what concerns me most is the writing. I would love my son to write, I would love him to read, and that is happening at Pearl's Garden School. I've seen many other children who have come, they were not able to write and now they can write. They can even read a few words.
We're beginning to wind down this interview now. So Harun, as we close, what should people not familiar with raising autistic children know? Because we leave our children in the care of nannies. You could leave your child in the care of your mother. What just as we close, your parting words on what people out there should be aware of as they deal with these children?
My parting word, Molly, would be that every child carries destiny in him or her, and therefore, however the condition of the child, be it autistic or any other special needs, there is a purpose and a meaning in life. what we all need as caregivers, mothers and fathers, provide adequate time for your child so as you may identify and know what was my child born to do.
What about the people in mashinani, wale watu wako ushago, the people who just, you know, isolate their children for lack of money? Because it sounds to me like if you have to help your child walk through this journey, then you need to have a little bit of money even to have them enrolled in, for instance, your school.
Basically, what I would do, or I would tell such parents, is that they still help even at the grassroots. You can come up and join groups that are of welfare based, and that means that your assistance can be found there.
Thank you very much for that. Susan, we're closing, and you know, we thank you so much for this amazing project. You started with Pearl's Garden. Tell us, you know, what it is that you have in the pipeline as regards this project and the support that you would like.
Yeah, well, for starters, I would love to meet the President, His Excellence Uhuru Kenyatta. I would love to talk to him about the challenges that we are going through. I would love to have a heart-to-heart talk with him as a special needs parent to the heart of the father of the nation. He needs to know that taxation is overwhelming. The foods that Mr. Haron is talking about, they are very expensive. The speech therapy sessions in Kenya, they're extremely expensive. And everything about an autistic child is extremely expensive. If only the president can exempt us from taxation as parents of special needs children, then our life may improve.
And you will be having a fundraiser very soon?
Yeah, on the 8th of April, we'll be having a fundraising in the school, whereby we're inviting all the corporates, stakeholders, government officials to just come and support a special needs child. Because we need to buy therapy equipment, we need to buy machinery, we need to buy play items, and many more things.
Many thanks, and we thank you so much for sharing your story with us. We've been talking to Suzanne Gichuru and indeed Haron Kimani. They are the founders of Pearl's Garden School, where evidence-based early intervention is emphasized with tailor-made and child-specific individualized education programs. They are on Facebook. You're based in Thome, I believe. Yeah, they're on Facebook. Look them up. Also, look them up in Thome if you happen to be driving down that way, and support their wonderful cause. We'll be back with all the day's business and sports. Stay tuned.